Hi everyone, Jenny Bramble here, and Dax Dumpling. I'm really excited to be presenting at SmartBear Virtual today. One of the things that I really love about these virtual conferences is that it gives us a chance to really step into the lives of the speakers we love and the attendees we love. All of this is really very interesting. And I'd like to challenge you to a little bit of a scavenger hunt. I would love to see something from your home that means something to you that kind of helps talk about your personality. Here's mine. This is a big puffy bat that I got for my birthday last year from one of my absolute best friends. She's amazing, and every time I give this bat a squeeze, I think about her. So after my talk, definitely hit me up. I'd love to see something really cool from your house. All right, who's ready to hear about building better teams through play? Perfect. I hope y'all can see that. Okay, so like I said, I want to talk to you today about building better teams through play. My name is Jenny Bramble, and human interfacing is my absolute favorite thing. I love it when humans and computers and humans and other humans can come together and create something gorgeous. My pronouns are she and her. Currently, I work at Willow Tree. Here's the game plan for the day. We are going to start out by talking about what play is. Then I'm going to talk about why we play and how we play. And then sort of get into how we start playing. And if anyone has any questions, we can definitely cover them in the Q&A afterwards. So let's start. What is play? Play is often thought of as an activity that children do. Games, puzzles, recess, sports, coloring. It's incredibly serious to the people playing, but full of things that aren't serious at all. If you describe dress up or role play or Dungeons and Dragons to anyone, it sounds a little ridiculous, right? When you look at the activities involved in it, they're ridiculous. But when you look at play overall, it's incredibly serious because it's such an important part of our development and how we form lasting bonds. It's a way to investigate our social structures, investigate what we can and can't do, and a way to start forming friendships. Children who are deprived of play score worse on almost every single metric, to the point where a lack of unstructured play concerns psychologists. And if you have kids, you see this in your children. As they play, they develop the skills that they need to survive and the skills that they need to thrive. The role of play in development describes play as an activity that is desired, involves an imaginary situation, and always involves rules. You know what? Kind of sounds like sprint planning. What I want to describe play as is a team activity that's fun, collaborative, and bonding. Play can have many elements: learning, development of social hierarchy, creation of something. But for the base definition, we're looking for something that's objectively fun for most everyone involved, collaborative and bonding. Keep this in mind for the rest of the talk. Here's what's interesting. Animals play to learn skills. You'll see that prey animals, they dodge, they run, they hide, and predators catch and claw and dig at things. You can see this with my cats. Whenever my older cat, Dante, plays, he is always on top. He always wins because that's their social hierarchy. It doesn't matter how fun and playful Dax, my younger cat, is being, Dante's always going to win. Just his thing. And you see it with the kinds of toys that they enjoy. They like this little circly thing because they can paw at it. It's a catching motion, a fish catching motion, actually. Dax actually plays with more of a variety of things than Dante does, and he plays more often than Dante does. This is interesting. It turns out those who have the most to learn play the most often. So you'll see younger animals playing, you'll see children playing, you'll see my cat playing, but we don't necessarily see older animals playing. We see lions maybe play with their cubs, but they mostly just sit around and do lion things. And this holds true to humans for some degree. Humans Children are strongly encouraged to play because they can experiment and learn about their world, see where they fit into it. But older adults, we don't play as much. We grill, we go to the pool, we hang out with our friends, we go clubbing, but we don't play. So why did we stop? And this is an interesting question, and I'm not a psychologist, so I don't really know, I suppose. What I think is we stop playing because there comes a point where it doesn't serve our needs as well. Formal playtime doesn't give us new skills necessarily. We've already learned how to stack blocks. We don't need to keep stacking blocks. Instead of having recess, we have meetings. And instead of playing hockey in the street, we're going to go grill in the backyard. They're potentially fun and satisfying activities, but they aren't really play. There's none of that creativity and that imagination that kind of gets stirred up. And yet, we do still play. We just play in a different way. We play video games, board games, sports, pranks on each other, puzzles, escape rooms. We do still find ways to bring play into our lives. We just don't have the same kind of unstructured playtime that children or young animals do. So that's fine. If we don't need to learn anything, why do we need to bring it back in, right? Well, here I've got 3 major points that I want to cover here. We should start playing again because play helps those with the most to learn. It creates and reinforces social bonds that we need to operate as a team. And it's good for your professional development. So we're going to start at the top here. Play helps those with the most to learn. Now this is going to sound a little weird because I just told you that children and young animals have the most to learn, so they're the ones that are going to be playing. But we're professional humans, right? We know our jobs. We've been doing our jobs for, let's not think about how long I've been doing my job. What do we need to learn? Turns out we need to learn a lot. I don't know if you ever was familiar with this, but this is the forming, storming, norming, performing model of teamwork. It postulates that there are several phases of a team. You start with forming, when a bunch of unrelated individuals are thrown into a bucket together. Storming happens when the team members are starting to communicate, but they're really operating as individuals and not a team. Norming is when they start to begin to work as a team, begin to stop seeing themselves as individuals and start seeing themselves as parts of a whole. From then on out, you've got performing and then sort of reevaluating. When you're in your storming and norming phases, you haven't learned enough about each other to be able to say, oh, these are my teammates, not just strangers I happen to be near. When you start to learn about each other, you start to become part of the team and you start to get into that performing phase. Play is an amazing way to short circuit the storming phase and bring people into a team faster. You'll notice before I talked about how play can help you look at social hierarchies and explore them. This is fantastic for a team that's just getting together and doesn't really know what the hierarchies are and doesn't really know how everyone fits into what they're doing. By giving people a framework that they can collaborate in a way they can't really fail, you are creating a place for them to explore their social hierarchies, and you're creating a psychologically safe place that people can have more team bonding. We learn about each other, we learn about how we work, and we start to see ourselves as a team because we've operated as a team. And if you're looking at the tiny little picture of me, yes, I found out you can order boba online, so we're having boba tea. For example, one of my favorite games to play that gives you a safe place to investigate these social hierarchies is called One Night Werewolf. If you're not familiar, there's essentially 2 teams. There's the werewolf team and the villager team. The werewolf team is trying to eat the villagers are trying to figure out who the werewolf is. There are a lot of different roles within the team. You could be someone that can look at other people's cards. You could be someone who knows who the werewolves are, but you can't say it. One of my favorite cards is the troublemaker. Anytime I'm the troublemaker, she's technically on the villager side, but I always play her as a werewolf because I'm an agent of chaos. And this gives us an area to kind of investigate what chaos looks like. What happens when I do something outside of what my social norms are, what my hierarchy says I should do. You're convincing people, hey, be on my side, don't be on my side. This person's a werewolf, that person's not a werewolf. And it's very interesting because you also get to see how people convince each other and what kind of social credit you actually have within the team. And once you've done One Night Werewolf a couple of times, you're going to be able to have actual conflict a little bit easier because you've already accused your boss of being a werewolf. You can't go wrong doing much else. And the game gives you a framework. It says these are the appropriate things, these are inappropriate. It's very, very interesting. A similar game is Secret Hitler, which is also fun and a little bit more, it's a longer game, and there's a little bit more intrigue in it. We should play sometime. Hit me up. And this also helps us create a team language. We have social bonds within a team. And that's one of the things that makes teams extremely strong is when you've got high psychological safety and when you've got bonds between team members that say, oh yes, I trust this person. I know how this person operates. If I ask them for something, I'm aware that they're going to give it to me and I feel good about that. Or they respect me. I respect them. These are beautiful things. And these are the social bonds that we need to have our team glued together so that we can have predictable, interesting conversations that lead to good outcomes. And I love language. I'm so into language. This is an entire talk in and of itself, so I'm going to try and keep it to like 3 minutes. One of the most psychologically safe ways to create a team and to create those social bonds is to create a language and a history for a team. In-jokes, behaviors that the team has that makes them feel part of the unit, anything that is special to your team is your team's history, it's your team's language. You're going to see a little bit later on, I actually talk about some of the oral histories and the languages that teams have created at my job. It's very interesting. One of the most cool parts of it is that the oral history and the traditions of the team start to act as a sort of initiation. You get into the team and someone tells you how it works. They tell you, oh, that's what this hand sign means when you're remote, or hey, this is what we do. And it makes the new member feel like they are part of the team almost instantly. It's incredible. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. Finally, play is a method of learning. I've said this a few times, but play is absolutely a way to learn. Again, with my predator and prey example, the prey is learning to hide, the predator is learning to catch. There are so many things that we do as part of our jobs and our lives that we don't get to practice a lot. We just have to assume we're good at them, or we just sort of do them and hope that everything's all right. Problem-solving skills, telling narratives, creating JIRA tickets. All of this is stuff that we can't really practice unless you're an actual storyteller and you go to a storytelling convention and you're like, hey, I'm going to tell a story, and all the other storytellers are like, wow, let us tell you how you can do that better. But if you were playing a game like One Night Werewolf, where you do have to create this narrative out of essentially nothing, or Dungeons and Dragons, classic narrative game, it teaches you how to create these narratives. And then when you come into your job and you're like, okay, why does the user need this? Why is this an important feature? Let me tell you the story. Let me explain to you how this is going to happen. It's gorgeous. So much like testing the social bonds, playing games can give us an opportunity to test parts of our professional development and figure out what we know and then actually practice it. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later when I start talking about how we play. Whoop, it's a little bit later. So we're going to talk about how we play. And I've got 4 things I want to talk about here. The first is going to be agile ceremonies. The second will be wolf time. Then we're going to talk about team outings and happy hours. And finally, we're going to talk about learning play, which is something I'm incredibly passionate about. You're gonna love it, I promise. First, I'd like to ask a question. And please feel free to answer this, as you're listening to the talk, send me a message, find me on Slack, on Twitter, whatever. How do you end your stand-ups? What do you do whenever you are done standing up? Do you have something you do, or do you just wander off kind of sadly to your desks? So I asked this question at work, and these are not all of the answers I got. This is only some of the answers. There are so many of these, and they are all a form of play. So I described play earlier as a team activity that's fun, collaborative, and bonding. Each of these fits this definition, and they are all incredibly silly. Some of them are incredibly silly, some are just mildly silly. There's chants, throwing of stuffed animals, synchronized clapping, and as the discussion progressed, my coworkers started retelling the oral histories of the teams. There's one in here in particular, there's a random word of the day. Someone says, okay, the random word of the day is octopus. And then the entire team will shout octopus. Another team does something similar where they have a random word, but they give the definition, and then they all shout the random word. What's interesting here is that the person that came up with the idea to do the word of a day doesn't work at my company anymore. But this idea has traveled around to every single team that he was on, and teams that new people are on that he was on a team with. So it started to spread out. And as the conversation progressed, we discussed where did this come from? Who started this? We started tracing it through the different teams. And it makes people feel like a part of a whole. Because I can say, oh, I do that because Tom did that. And Tom can say, oh, I did that because George did that. George did that because Lauren did that. And we can just trace it all the way back. And it gives us kind of a lineage almost. It's very interesting to see, and it's very wonderful to have this kind of bonding experience throughout the entire company. One of my favorites on this list was I want to end stand-up with a rose ceremony like on The Bachelor. I'm not entirely sure how that would work, but once we're back in the physical office again, I want to see if I can make it work. Having a team tradition for ending ceremonies is play. This isn't just stand-up, also retro, grooming, sprint planning. I was on a team where we would end stand-up with a clap, and then we would end retro with a reverse clap, which is where you press your palms together, count to 3, and then whoosh. It was ridiculous and wonderful, and I've seen it spread to about 3 different teams now. Just hilarious. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is wolf time. Actually, let's talk about flow time first. So flow, or being in the zone, is this mental state when a person is performing an activity fully immersed. Just you're energized, you're focused, you are doing the thing. This is when you get most of your work done, and it's when you have that amazing runner's high. You're just going. You could do this forever. Flow is an amazing state. It's the optimal state for working. It is incredibly important to anyone who wants to maximize efficiency. You want to maximize your flow state. Okay, so if that's flow time, what's wolf time? Wolf time is the opposite of flow time. I should have warned y'all, there's a dad joke here. It's not my dad joke, but it's a dad joke. Instead of saying, okay, this is when we are focused on work, we are just dedicated to work, 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 it is a time to not work, to specifically do something outside of your job with your team that is creative and interesting and fun. It is a time for structured or unstructured play with the adults that you work with. I'm not going to take credit for coming up with wolf time like this. This was someone at my job, but they said I could totally use it. It's not work. It helps us build those bonds. And it's important enough at my company that we actually talk about it when our teams are first coming together and first starting to norm. So what does wolf time look like? Wolf time is semi-structured. It's regular. I've been on teams that have done it once a sprint, and I'm on a team currently that does wolf time about every week. It's usually limited to about an hour or less, and usually has someone who's in charge of it. Someone that says, hey, okay, let's do wolf time, let's plan something, or if they can't do it, they'll hand it off to someone else. Yeah, I think I've been on teams that have done wolf time more than once a week, but that's generally been because people can't make it. So they're trying to get as many people into wolf time as possible. Okay, that's cool, but what do you do? Like, what does semi-structured playtime mean? Again, I asked this question at work and I got a lot of answers. In one of my last teams, someone hadn't seen Aliens. So we actually watched Alien and then we watched Aliens. We split each movie into about half, watched it in a dark conference room. It was amazing. People played board games, went on a scavenger hunt in the office, built Lego sculptures. That was a really fun one because they had a bunch of Legos and they got some kind of loose definitions of what they were building. And then they just went crazy with it. Loved it. Oh, we painted ornaments for a holiday tree once. That was pretty cool. It was really interesting to see who was creative and who painted the ornaments just straight black. That was fun. Since we've been remote, it's been a little bit more interesting and a little bit more difficult. One of the things that we've started doing is playing games, like online games. Drawful 2 is incredibly popular. The Jackbox games are incredibly popular. And there's a few other kind of collaborative games that you can play without someone having to buy a console or have a system to do. I do know there are some teams that will play like PS4 together if everybody's got the same game. And a few of us will watch movies together or stream a webinar or something interesting. Hey, maybe you could stream this webinar. One team did make gingerbread houses. This was really cool because they had all the supplies for gingerbread houses. They made the gingerbread houses, and then the rest of the company ate the gingerbread houses. The common theme here is that it's something not work-related and something intentionally fun. Now, I want to talk to you about my favorite wolf time ever. And I'm super proud of this one. So my team was in crunch time. We were having just, oh my gosh, one of those weeks where we just didn't feel like we were making progress. We were just having a rough go of it. Morale was down, stress was up, whew, and I offered to run wolf time. And you may be thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. You just said crunch time. You just said too much work. And then you said you're gonna take an hour off. Yes, I did. Because sometimes actually taking time off is what helps you be a better team. It brings you back into the mental space that you need to be able to do your jobs. So what I did was I drew, so this is our logo, the Willow Tree logo. I drew it over, what is this, 12 different little blocks. I think they were either 8x8 or 6x6 with a pencil. And I said, okay, y'all, paint it any way you want to, but you have to stay in the lines. Like you have to stay in the lines. So we spread out garbage bags all over the big giant table in the kitchen, spread out all of these little pieces. We had paint everywhere. People were passing paint back and forth. There was glitter, there was metallics, there was all of this crazy stuff. And it was spectacular. We de-stressed. Even the people that weren't interested in painting, they stood around and acted like art critics. I mean, you could tell we're all pretty solid artists here. It was really fun because we got to have this great bonding moment where the team sat together and did this activity. We were so much calmer afterwards, and we were able to actually talk about this experience. I put this painting, this mosaic up in our team space. So every time we'd walk past, we'd be like, oh, you remember that time? And when new people would come onto the team, they'd be like, yeah, that was wolf time. We did that wolf time. It was so great. I've actually run it for a couple other teams, and it's been incredible. It's been so much fun. Just sit there, do something collaborative, create something physical that you can look at and take with you. It's so good. Next, I want to talk about team outings and happy hours. So these are definitely a form of play, and a lot of times they are kind of presented as a perk. Like, oh yeah, we have happy hour, we have team outings. That's great. But they're also very important to a team's morale, to a team's bonding, to a team's sort of social engagement. Again, I asked what people did for outings. So trivia. Actually, there were a lot of people that did team trivia. Scavenger hunts, games, escape rooms. Okay, so the test team did an escape room here in Durham, and we were like 10 seconds off of having the best time ever. And that was because someone dropped one of the keys. That was me. I think it was me. Co-op games. We had a Smash Brothers competition in the office a while back. It was awesome. Larger outings and happy hours create these bonds, let you explore the social structures of the company at large, of potentially the team at large. I would argue that they're not as important as like team-focused events and wolf time, but they are incredibly, incredibly valuable. The next thing we're going to talk about is learning through play. So I am incredibly passionate about learning through play. I run what we call office hours, essentially a time for the test engineers in my office to come together and have testing related events. A talk, a discussion, an AMA, occasionally a workshop, and we play games. Testers Play Day is one of the most popular events I run. I have literally 24 games with one big thing in common. They all teach something about software development, critical thinking, testing, or agile methodology. Don't worry, I will provide these as a resource on the last slide, and you can always ping me and I'll send them to you. So let me give you an example of a game we play. Who here knows TestSphere? I love TestSphere. It is a set of cards that have to do with different aspects of testing. Feelings, heuristics, quality aspects, techniques, and patterns. Each card gives you a definition and an example of the term. So for this one, I've got data, which is a quality aspect. It moves in, through, and from your app. It can get stuck, lost, scrambled, and duplicated. So it gives you a definition of what it is. Now, next to the cards, you see a bunch of other cards. I created an expansion to TestSphere called TestSphere Arena. And it essentially takes TestSphere and turns it into a game of Uno. So it includes, draw 4, draw 2, skip, reverse, wilds, all of these. And they all have incredibly adorable names. Like Flaky Test means you have to pick up 2 cards. Skip is paid time off. They're adorable. I think one of the wilds is the 3 Amigos. When you're playing TestSphere Arena, what you have to do is you can play like on like. So I could play a quality aspect on a quality aspect for free. I could play a feeling on a feeling for free. But if I wanted to do something like playing the feeling frustration on the technique of regression testing, I have to tell a story and make the 2 connect. So I would say something like, so when I need to do regression tests and there's a lot of them and I have nothing automated, that makes me feel frustrated. I have a lot of frustration, so I play the card. And everybody at the table can say, oh, yeah, we don't buy it. Or, oh yeah, that works, yeah, it works. Just does a couple of different things. It teaches you about the testers on your team. What are the experiences they've had? What things do they think about? How do their minds work? And it brings to mind some of these testing concepts that maybe you haven't thought about in a while. Maybe it's something you haven't really thought about, like exploratory testing or ad hoc testing formally. And now it's back in the front of your mind. It also teaches you who is going to play a draw 4 on you 3 times in a row. Not that that happened several times. It's a fun game, and it is a practical game. It's also downloadable. The expansion pack is downloadable for free. I have a list of about 20 games like that, and I'll include the resources at the end. They range from games about requirement gathering, to tech debt, to how the SDLC works, to soft skills problems. One of my favorites is murder mysteries, but instead of like an actual murder, I have one that's about a dog show, and one of the dogs gets Nair put in her shampoo, so the other dogs have to figure out who did it. It's adorable. It's ridiculous. It's critical thinking skills. There's a game for almost any problem your team can find themselves facing, and almost every group can find something to improve their skills. Okay, so how do you start? Like, I've talked a lot about how do you play, how do you do these things, but how do you start playing? I want to talk a little bit about the zone of proximal development. The first is where we currently are, things you can do with no assistance and are very comfortable with. Moving past that, you've got skills that are just outside your comfort zone, but can be done with guidance and encouragement. Past that are things you can't do at all, like even with guidance, it's just beyond you right now. When introducing new concepts like playtime to groups that haven't done it before, you need to be careful about asking too much. You need to be careful about saying, hey, let's just go fish for an hour, or let's roll a bunch of D&D characters, let's go play giant Jenga. If your team isn't in tune with these sorts of ideas, it can be very difficult for them to move into a realm where playing is actually something that they can do. And you'll also find teams that are very reluctant. They'll say, well, I don't see how this directly impacts my job, and so I don't want to do it. So I don't want to be doing something that's not my job right now. I find this a lot whenever teams have been in crunch time. They'll say, well, I need this hour. I need this hour to test. I need this hour to develop. I need this hour to do things. And that can be really difficult. And honestly, at that point, you're probably not going to get away with saying, well, we're going to do wolf time anyway. It's going to be great. Because at the end of wolf time, people are like, oh God, now I have to go spend 2 extra hours and I can't get home for dinner. It can be very difficult. So what I recommend is actually starting small. So look at your team and where they are right now. Who is on your team? How interested are they in the idea of playtime? How interested are they in moving like that? My suggestion is to start with how you end your ceremonies. I love this because it's very small and it can be very silly and very easy to introduce. Say something like, hey, at the end of stand-up, let's all clap on a count of 3. Or something like, hey, at the end of stand-up, let's do snaps. It can be funny. Or I'm gonna come up with a word of the day and we're all gonna learn about this word of the day. It's gonna be great, I promise. It's not always great, but you can always promise it'll be great. Especially with a lot of us being remote right now, it can feel like we're kind of losing that connection if the end of stand-up is just, hey, see ya. What my team is currently doing is we hold our hands up like this, and someone counts us down to 3, and then we all try and clap on 3, and then we judge how much latency there is in the Zoom call. It's very adorable. Other teams, they still do their team chant. Here, 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 go. It's fun. It's interesting. It's cute. It can help the team feel like they're connected to each other again. Once you have that in place, then you can start evaluating and say, okay, where can we move next? Does the team feel like they are open to something like a 30-minute wolf time, a 45-minute wolf time, an hour-long wolf time? Hey, do y'all want to play some Jackbox games at 3 p.m. on Friday? Do you want to have tea time? Let's everybody get your favorite beverage at 2 p.m. and we're going to have tea time. We're going to just get on a call. We're going to show everybody our cool mugs. I don't have a cool mug on my desk. We're going to show everybody our cool mugs. We're going to talk about like what tea we're drinking or coffee we're drinking or soda or whatever. And even that, even though it's not play, can be something that leads you into wolf time, leads you into the playtime. You can do things like there's Tabletop Simulator. There's a couple other free tabletop games where you can do things like play Go Fish. play hearts, play any games like that. It's really interesting. And you can also do a learning activity. I find that's a pretty good way to get people into things. Be like, hey, we're gonna do a learning activity around requirements gathering. It's gonna be great. These can also be done over Zoom. There's one I like in particular called 99 Balloons. And you give them very vague ideas of how to draw a balloon. And then you say, oh, well, I meant for the eyes to be square, not round. And you can actually do this with a Zoom whiteboard. Pop up the Zoom whiteboard, divide it into sections for each person, and they draw it. And they're like, oh, we have to change this. And it gets people asking questions. They're like, oh, wait, okay, so I didn't ask what color the eyes were. Are they red? Does it matter? Should the balloon be like big or little? Or it's very cool. It's very fun. It can also be a good way, like I said, to sort of get people into Wolf Time, get people into it because it looks like a part of your job, right? Okay, let me recap. Play is a team bonding and building activity. It is incredibly important. Creatures who need to learn the most play the most, and we fall into that category, especially when we've got new teams. Start small and work up to bigger games, work up to these bigger events. And any play is healthy. Any play that you can get into your team, into your culture is incredibly healthy. Feel free to find me online. You can email me. You can find me on Twitter, Jenny Does Things. I'm also on LinkedIn, though I don't check my LinkedIn hardly at all. And like I said, I'm still at Willow. A couple of resources. This article and this book were incredibly powerful and incredibly impactful to me. And I will also be providing these slides. You can get them from me at some point. Like I said, I've also got lists of games, and I would be incredibly happy to show them to you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope you're enjoying the rest of SmartBear Connect Virtual. Toodles.